Well, thank you everybody for being on time and joining us today. It is noon on a Friday, right before a nice long 3-day weekend, hopefully for everybody on the call. We're going to give everybody another minute or so, maybe 2 minutes. Grab a cup of coffee, grab some water, snacks if you need them, and we'll get started here shortly. Alrighty, let's get going, guys. Thank you again, as always, for joining today's webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about ACM and VMware. As most of you guys hopefully know, or if you don't, ACM is fully compatible and runs inside of a VM environment. So I'm actually going to start things off with a quick poll for the people that are on. So go ahead and answer this one if you wouldn't mind. And then we'll go through a couple slides here, just showing off, what we're going to be covering today. As always, I've got a couple great colleagues in the session today, going to be monitoring our questions. So if you have questions, please throw them in the question section. And if you can't see the poll, make sure that you hit escape on your keypad and get out of full screen view, and you'll be able to see the poll. Resounding yeses, I like it. I was hoping that would be the answer. All right, let's go ahead and shut that down. Get back to the agenda here. All right, so today we're going to be talking about a little bit of what is VMware? For those of you, it looks like about 23% of you guys aren't really familiar with VMware, so we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about how ACM utilizes VMware for our deployments and for our requirements. We are going to go through what those requirements are for ACM and some of the best practices that we suggest when it comes to deploying ACM inside of VMware. And then I'm going to go through a quick live demo of deployment, what a system is going to look like inside of at least my VMware environment. This is something we are going to talk about. VMware has a bunch of different meanings and it's got a bunch of different looks. So if mine looks different than yours, I apologize, but it's all the basic same concept. So what is VMware? All right, so VMware is a virtualization technology that essentially, the way that we utilize it, we're using it as a bare metal hypervisor. And if you don't know what that means, basically you take a computer or you take computer hardware, and VMware is now going to be the host for being able to run multiple operating systems underneath that single VMware instance, or in a clustered instance. This is used a lot in data center applications, but it's also a very common commercial application where a server that you guys have already in your environment has enough horsepower to not only run Windows locally, or a Windows server locally, but it's got enough horsepower to not only run Windows, but a Linux VM, another Windows VM, maybe it's Windows 10, or in our case, we've got the ability to run ACM from within VMware. And one great thing about VMware is it's compatible with virtually every single operating system that you would see out there on the market. Talked about Windows, Linux operating systems, whether that's Ubuntu or CentOS or whatever it is, and Unix operating systems as well. So what is virtualization? Okay, now this is the simple version. Okay, I am doing this at a very high level, guys. I'm not going to get into exactly all of the architectures, because VMware spans a lot of different products. What I'm going to be focusing on most is that bare metal hypervisor, whether that's VMware ESX or ESXi, inside of their vSphere series of products. So essentially here, you've got the host, and the host is that server or that workstation, basically the computer that's going to run the hypervisor. And if you think about a hypervisor, it's essentially an operating system that allows you to run additional operating systems inside of that one operating system. So you'll see here, we've got our server, we've got VMware running, and then we've got our virtual machines. And these are containers, or they're virtual instances of an operating system running an application. Okay, so in this case, I've kind of drawn my little box here. ACM, Access Control Manager, slides in right here as one of those virtual machines running an operating system, which happens to be Linux, and then it runs all of our applications to make ACM work. So unlike some of the other systems that you may see out there, whether it's access control or video or building management system, we're not loading ACM on top of another operating system. So we're not installing Windows and then installing ACM on top of that that operating system. If you think about it in terms like this, ACM is an operating system. Okay, it's running Linux. We put all of our bits and bytes and parts and pieces and services into that virtual instance, and then we're just loading it onto this hypervisor that's going to be running that virtual instance. So I can run ACM concurrently with a Windows VM, whether that's running ACC or whether that's running my domain controller or whatever other operating systems I need, all in one box. Okay. So how does ACM utilize VMware? Now, ACM is compatible with some specific versions of VMware products, specifically ESX, ESXi, and VMware Workstation. This is what we describe in our documentation. One thing to note, and this is kind of a note on here, it's also a best practice. If you are deploying a brand new ACM 6 deployment of the platform, you must be running version 6.5 or greater of VMware ESX or ESXi. If you deploy an ACM 5 version of ACM in VMware, we are backwards compatible to VMware 5.5 and above. So the reason that I wanted to put that here on this slide was, if you have a customer that is using an older version of VMware, and for whatever reason they're not able to perform an upgrade to the latest version, 6.5, 6.7, or now VMware 7 is out, if they're not able to do that for whatever reason, you can still deploy ACM using a previous version, ACM 5 in that case, and then upgrade it to ACM 6. This is all based on the way that we deploy, which is that pre-configured OVA template that you'll see at the bottom there in the last bullet point. An OVA file is essentially like a zip file. Okay, so it takes the operating system and the virtual drive, and it combines it into one file so that you can quickly and easily deploy using a single file. And I'm going to show you guys that here live. A couple other notes on here. You can use VMware Workstation. Okay, so VMware Workstation is a virtualization inside of an operating system. So if I have, Microsoft Windows running on a computer, I can load VMware Workstation and then run virtual instances inside of VMware Workstation. However, we don't recommend that for production environments. Main reason being is now you are at the mercy of Windows to control that virtual instance and that virtual hypervisor. So you want to make sure that if you're using VMware Workstation or you're using VMware Player, they're kind of interchangeable. If you're using either one of those deployments, it's for testing purposes. It's for non-production environments. It's to throw on your laptop or throw on a workstation in your office to try out ACM or test some functionality, or maybe set up a system to take a backup and then send out with your technician to load inside the customer's network. That's really what we see the use case for VMware Workstation and VMware Player. OVA templates, right? So I talked a little bit about that. Those OVA templates can be downloaded from our partner resource center. For those of you guys who have access to the webinar here, this is in PDF format, and that is a hyperlink that you can click to go to the partner resource center. And the best part about that, it's free, okay? If you are a partner on the partner resource center, you can navigate, and I'm going to show you where to go here in a minute. You can navigate and download our OVA template for free and load it into your environment today. Now, it's not going to work yet. You still need licensing. There's still things that you're going to need to make your system work. However, we provide that OVA template for free. It is yours. You can go get it right now. Some requirements and best practices, okay? One of the things that we see happen a lot in our deployment is a customer already has VMware, you know, and it's running, you know, 10 or 12 or 15 other virtual machines. It's got a certain cap on the amount of RAM and processing power, and then we're installing another virtual instance of ACM, and now, you know, we're kind of fighting for resources. So it's a good best practice to make sure that the VMware host, that bare metal hypervisor, has these minimum specifications, okay? So these minimum specifications are the absolute bare minimum that you need to run ACM. If you want to run ACM efficiently and quickly, and you have a high transaction rate system, or you have, you know, hundreds or thousands of identities and lots of transactions, it is recommended that you upgrade or you increase some of the performance specs inside of the VM. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that. It is also, and I probably should have put highly right here, it is highly recommended, if at all possible, to utilize solid state storage for the data store that you're going to be deploying VMware or deploying ACM on. VMware is really great about the tolerances in their data stores and their drives. So you can have a data store that's just SSD storage versus a data store that has spinning media, hard drives, and things like that, or iSCSI or whatever it is. It is recommended, based on transaction per hour, that you deploy VMware in a SSD data store. The reason that we say those things is because those are the specifications of our Enterprise Plus appliance. And we've basically taken those specifications and said VMware deployed systems should be able to meet those specifications to follow our performance recommendations. Okay, so you want to make sure, if at all possible, increase that VRAM. You can increase the virtual CPUs. You can add, you know, additional hard drive space if you think you need to. Now, one thing I did fail to put on the slide here. This is a 500 gig thin provisioned drive. Okay, so it is not going to just consume 500 gigs and that's all it's ever going to get. It's going to expand to meet that capacity over time. So it's going to start out at a certain size, and then it's going to grow to the size of that 500 gig drive. In my 3+ years of working with ACM, I have yet to see a system hit 500 gigs in size. However, you can always increase that if you need to. Another kind of key thing, I probably should put this in red. We are only certified to work with VMware hypervisors. We do get the question asked a lot, what about Hyper-V? What about Zen? What about Proxmox? If you are able to deploy VMware or ACM inside of one of these other hypervisors, that's great. The challenge with that is we are only certified to work in a VMware environment. Our technical support, our end user license agreement is all based around VMware. If you deploy in another hypervisor, I'm not saying that it's not going to work. However, you may experience different results, and support is not going to be able to help you because of you're deploying in a non-supported environment. So just really keep that in mind, guys. The last thing here is that upon installation of ACM inside of VMware, there's two built-in network interfaces, NIC1, NIC2. Those are hard-coded with an IP address. Just like we have in our physical appliances, NIC number 1 is going to be hard-coded with 192.168.1.201, and NIC number 2 is going to use the one that you guys see on the screen here. In a lot of cases, VMware is not simple, right? Or the network of your customer may not be simple. They may not be able to reach 192.168.1.201. It may be blocked. It may not be something that they can access. So you can contact technical support, and they can work with you that through the shell to be able to change that IP address if you cannot browse to this to one of those IP addresses, okay? With that, before I run into the deployment here, I'm gonna run 2 quick polls. Just wanna kind of get a feel of the room. Love the interaction, guys. Thank you very much. And as that's running, don't forget, guys, the question section is still available to you guys for asking any questions throughout the webinar here. All right. Go ahead and close that guy down, and let's get out of full screen. I wanted to start by showing you guys where to find images or those OVA files in the Partner Resource Center. So if you navigate to partners.avigilon.com, and I challenge you guys to do this today if you're interested in deploying VMware, you know, you've got VMware running at your office, you want to kind of do what I'm doing, whether it's, you know, during the session or afterwards. This is where you're going to go. You're going to go to partners.avigilon.com, you're going to click on software, and then you're going to go into ACM 6. Now remember, if you're running a version of VMware prior to 6.5, you are going to need to download a ACM 5 image. And you'll notice that we label the images with the term virtual image. So this is going to be that OVA file. For new installations, we do recommend, you know, grab the latest one. No reason not to. So this ACM 6.4.2.9 virtual image is our latest and greatest OVA. I click on this guy, I go download, and it's going to download it. You save it where you want. Now this file is about a 2 gigabyte file. You can download that, and then once you have it downloaded, you're going to load up your hypervisor. Okay, so I am personally logged directly into my ESXi, VMware ESXi host. If you're using vSphere server or you're using vCenter server, you can also do this through the vSphere server as well, which is going to be managing your hypervisor. So if you have a customer, they've got multiple VM servers, they're managed by vSphere, you can certainly do this that way as well. I personally, I'm going to go straight through my bare metal hypervisor, and I'm going to show you guys how easy it is to deploy ACM, okay? So we're not going to go through the whole thing because I don't need you guys to sit here and watch, you know, 5 minutes of this thing uploading. However, you're going to select your creation type, deploy virtual machine from an OVF or OVA. The only difference between these two things, guys, just for your reference, is an OVF is 2, possibly 3 files, an OVA file is 1. Going to click next. I'm going to give it a name, call this ACM webinar demo, select my file. I've already pre-downloaded this OVA file. Here it is right here. Going to click open, click next. I now have the option to place this new virtual instance in a data store of my choosing. Okay, so on my system, my data store 1 is my SSD data store. So I've got 500 gigs in RAID 0 in my VMware host. My data store 2 is spinning Rust. It's a couple hard drives giving me a 1.36 terabytes. And then I also have an iSCSI SAN connected to my VMware host. So in this instance, because of those recommendations, I'm going to pick data store 1. I want to put this on the fastest media possible. Okay, so click next. From here, you're going to connect this to the network that is appropriate for ACM to be able to communicate with all of the devices. Okay, so in a customer application, they may have 30 or 40 of these because they have a different VLAN or a different network for different things on their network. Mine, once again, very simple, very easy. I have one network that's attached to my demonstration environment, so I'm going to pick that guy. Disk provisioning, as I mentioned before, I want to provision this as a thin provisioned hard drive. If you need to, there are use cases where you can provision this as thick. I prefer not to eat up 500 gigs of storage on my SSD, so I'm going to use thin provisioning. This is also another kind of key option here. I personally prefer to not power my VM on automatically when I first deploy, because there's some changes that I can make when the VM first gets deployed that I can only do if the VM is powered off. Okay, so I would click next. It's going to tell me, hey, here's all the stuff that's going to get installed, and then normally I would click finish, and this would take 2 to 5 minutes. Upload the file and deploy the VM host. For the purposes of demonstration here, I already did that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to power off this VM that I previously deployed. And I want to get in and I want to show you guys what changes you can make to a VM prior to it booting up or in its powered off state. Because we talked about in the slides there, changing the virtual RAM or changing the virtual CPUs. You can only do that if the VM is powered off. Okay, so if I go to VM demo, edit settings, I now have the option to edit these settings for this specific virtual instance. Now, my VM host, I've got 128 gigs of RAM in it. Obviously, I'm not going to give ACM all 128 gigs of RAM, but I want to give it, we're going to give it 32. So that would be what, 31,384, just underneath. So 4,096 times 4. As I mentioned before, if I needed to increase this hard disk size, I can. Virtual CPUs really does not have an effect on ACM. So by increasing the cores per socket or increasing the amount of virtual CPUs is not going to give you a ton of performance improvement, but RAM will. Now, the other thing that's really important in here is in the OVA, I was only allowed to choose one VM network for my network adapters. In your customer's case, you may have to split those networks. I may have to put, NIC number 1, which was that 192.168.1 address, on one NIC, and that's what I'm going to use to connect to all of my Mercury hardware. But maybe the ACC VMS is on a separate network. It's on a surveillance network. So here I can actually change the second network adapter to connect to a different virtual network. Okay, but from here, I'm all good. Obviously, don't need a CD drive. Don't need a video card because we're not ever going to be getting into the box and looking at it at the screen. Go ahead and save that. It's going to reconfigure my my VM with the new settings that I changed. Going to power this guy on, and in the console here, we're going to watch the boot process. Okay. For those of you guys who've been with ACM for a while, you know that the boot process changed a little bit in from version 5.12.0 to 5.12.2. So we actually do show the entire startup process, and you can see when the appliance is completely booted up and ready to go, okay? So we're gonna give this a second here, and while that's doing its thing, we're gonna throw in one more poll here. And even though you guys can't see this, it is starting my network services. It's running all of my service scripts. So it's starting my Nginx web server. It's starting Open LDAP. It's doing all of the things in the background to get ACM ready to run. Looking pretty even here between physical and virtual. Definitely good to know. And thanks, Rob and Francisco, for answering a couple of those questions. We'll circle back to those when we get to the end here. And sounds like everybody's got their answers in, and we are back. Okay, so now this is what you're gonna see when you click on the console window inside of VMware. Okay, so for reference, if I clicked on a Windows box, right? So if I've got a console open for Windows, I have the ability, just like if this were my own desktop, come on, to log into Windows, and I'm using this just like it was another computer. Because ACM is an appliance and it does not really have a head, as it were, to view what's going on. This is access to the shell, but as you can see here, I don't have the ability to do anything here, okay? This is something that is reserved for our technical support division to be able to go in and, as I mentioned before, make those changes that you might need to manage your system. Now, my ACM system that I just ran and the workstation that I'm working on, I know are on the same network. So I should be able to log into the default IP address. I'm going to get my login screen. I'm going to go admin. And because this was a brand new version of ACM, I'm going to just change this password real quick. And we'll go ahead and log in. And there you go. I'm in ACM at this point. Now, the first steps that you need to take are changing some of this information so that you can change the IP address. So by default, our appliances come with no host name, no appliance name, nothing. The operating system or the ACM operating system has to know what it is so that you can move forward with adding IP addresses or changing IP addresses. So once again, I'm just going to give this a simple name. I'm going to change my hardware type to enterprise because this is a virtual instance. We want to use enterprise. If I needed to change my alarm gateway port, I'm going to be doing LDAP and things like that. I can change all that stuff right now. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and change to my time zone. We've talked about this in previous webinars. DNS is important. Always put a DNS server. I always recommend a time server as well. We also recommend this time server. If you're using ACC as well, make sure that you are setting your time server on ACM to the same time server on your ACC system so that your messaging is the same between them. This can be local, or in my case, this is going to be an internet address. One thing you guys will notice here, I saved host name for last, okay? So I'm gonna now put in my host name. Just gonna go ahead and copy this, place it there, and you'll see I get the message. Clicking save will change the name. When I go ahead and click save, we can come over here and monitor this. Make sure it took a save. Go ahead and monitor this, and now we did send a reboot to the appliance so that it takes the changes that I made in the appliance name, the host name, and all of that information. Now, once this ends up booting up, it's going to present you with those IP addresses that I had in the slide prior to. So you'll see starting up, rebooting the system, going to take me another minute or so. While that is doing, once again, while it's doing its thing, I'm going to throw out the last poll for today. Thank you guys for all of your interaction. Really good timing on the poll because FedEx guys showed up and then dogs freaked out. It'll give us another 15, 20 seconds here. Appreciate all the feedback, guys. And we'll go ahead and close this guy out. No more polls for today, folks. And now we're back. Okay, and now you can see in my ACM system, I am running version 6.4.2.9. I get my host name. I get my, notice this is the same default IP address that it was before. So now I can log into that IP address using the credentials that I had before. I can go up to my appliance and I can now change the port to match my network, right? So I need to match my the network that this VMware host is on, which is actually in my environment, 172.16.1. Hopefully I don't pick something in conflicts. Let's try 14 and pray that works. 172.16, save that. And now my system will get a new IP address. And I should be able to log in with that new IP address. And here we go. All right. Because my IP changed, it's going to ask me for my username and password again. And this is no different than the normal startup. When you pull an ACM appliance out of the box, you've got to go through those steps. You do need to accept the EULA. Want to make sure we accept that. And then from there, I can start to do my licensing and things like that. Okay. With that, guys, I know this was kind of a short session covering VMware and ACM. I'm going to open it up to questions for the next couple minutes. It looks like we had a couple in here that my wonderful colleagues were able to answer. Deployed ACC. Oh, okay.
Yeah, they all answered, Jared.
Gotcha.
So there is a very good one that I think we need to comment with everyone here. And the question is, hey, if I have VMware high availability, do I need to use a redundancy in, or should I use redundancy in ACM or some type of backup procedure, right? Redundancy or replication or redundancy. Really up to the customer, right? Usually when you have a VMware and you have a high availability, you are pretty safe, you're pretty covered. So usually we leave that to the customer. Our suggestions obviously will be the most, most secure, the most safe one, I guess is the word. We would suggest, yes, go ahead and do it. At least do backups of ACM and put those backups out, right? But high availability in VMware is a very stable, very secure type environment where they can guarantee that the systems will work, will continue to operate in case of one server fails or something like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Francisco. Something else I did want to mention, and it kind of goes back to my slide here. I'll go ahead and show this. I talked about not being able to deploy in any of these hypervisors, right? Like I said, doesn't mean you can't, just means that you're not going to get the support that you would if you were deploying in VMware. That also goes for cloud deployments as well. We do get the question asked a lot, hey, can I deploy this in AWS? Can I deploy it in Microsoft Azure? The answer is yes. You certainly can deploy ACM inside of a cloud solution, whether that's AWS or whatever it is. It has to be a VMware instance inside of that cloud. So typically Amazon or Microsoft Azure, they have ways of you being able to purchase cloud storage inside of your account for a VMware instance of product, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're spinning up VMware inside the cloud, and then you're deploying ACM inside of VMware in that cloud. Technically, that is fully supported because you're still deploying in VMware, There are also other hosted services out there that will spin up a virtual instance of VMware for you inside of a cloud, and you pay monthly. So if I have, if I have partners on the call here today, you don't have to spin up a box in your own office if you don't want to. If you are already working with a cloud hosting company, just reach out to them and say, hey, what's the cost to spin up a VMware instance so that we can run ACM inside of the cloud? And now you have a cloud hosted solution, whether that's for your own office or for hosting to your customers and things like that. Remember, ACM, because we provide that OVA template, you can deploy it in any VM instance that you have access to, right? So if you have access to a virtual version of ACM up in AWS, go ahead, install it up there. If you're doing it locally at your own office or your customer's site, you can deploy it there as well. We just have to kind of stay away from those other hypervisors, just to make sure that we're getting the support that our customers and partners that you guys deserve. So, any other questions, comments? Is there a liability disclosure that so Jeff, the answer to that is not really. So because even when we're using a virtual environment, and I'm sorry, the question is there a liability disclosure as to what works and what doesn't in the event of network connectivity breaking? And really, the answer is no. We don't have a disclosure there. What we do tell you and anybody on the call is it's the reason that we leverage Mercury hardware in a lot of cases, because in the event that an appliance goes offline, whether that's virtual or physical or deployed in the cloud, the panels will still hold their field information and still allow traffic through based on last known state or the state of the reader at that time. Obviously, in that case, you're not going to be able to send any new new configuration changes. Schedules and things like that are not going to work properly. There's some things that are not going to work properly if the appliance is offline. However, basic functionality, card swipe, get through a door, that will still work in the event that an appliance does go offline. Tony, we're going to leave that one off for now because I think the best way to deploy VMware, whether you're testing or you're using it for a customer, is we do have the ability to give you that OVA template, or you can download that OVA template. But definitely a good question. One thing I will state about that, we have demo licensing available as well. So for anyone who's on the call today who wants to be able to, try out ACM, I can provide, or one of the sales engineers on the call, you can reach out to us. We can provide a 30-day demonstration license of ACM. You can go to the partner portal, download the OVA template, spin it up in your network, do the network settings that I just talked about, contact one of us, and we will send you an activation key, and you can deploy ACM for 30 days. At that point, when we know you love it and you're ready to buy it, just reach back out to us and we can work with one of our regional sales managers in your territory to give you a permanent license for your system. So that's a great option, guys, especially for my partners that are on the call, and even some of you end users that are on the call here. If you just need to try out a feature, if you want to know, hey, what does badging look like, or what would Bosch intrusion look like, or maybe, hey, I want to test out Active Directory like we talked about in our previous webinar last week. If you want to try out a feature, those demo licenses are a great resource for you, because you can do it basically at no fault to you, right? You set up the system, you make the connection, you test everything out. VMware gives you the ability to perform snapshots on each one of your virtual hosts or your virtual machines. So you can go through, you can make a bunch of changes, snapshot before you make a bunch of changes. And then when I get the system the way that I want, cool, no problem. and then I can snapshot back to a state where the system is stable, or I want to snapshot back to a previous version. So VMware really does give you and your customers a lot of flexibility when it comes to deployment. And I'll be totally honest with you, we are seeing more and more systems being deployed in VMware because, as you guys, the customers know, you've spent a lot of money on your infrastructure. You already have servers, or you already have VMware in your environment. This is just another operating system that you can throw on there with no additional hardware cost, because you've already paid for that, right? There is a license cost to deploy VMware permanently, but as I keep driving this home, guys, that OVA template is free. You can go for it and download it right now. Hopefully some of you guys are.
Hey, Jared.
Yes.
There is a question that came, not in the chat, but came to me on the other side. If you could explain. So I guess the original question that I was trying to answer was, if you need to provide a ACM redundancy if you have a high availability. But in reality, the question is, what is the difference between the two?
So the difference between the two is VMware does have the ability to provide its own redundancy, and it's actually very similar to what we do with our replication and hot failover. So I can have multiple VM servers or multiple VM hypervisors that are all managed by one vCenter or vSphere server, and using what VMware calls HA, or high availability. In the event that a single appliance or a single VM goes down, or an entire VM host goes down, that secondary appliance basically takes over, and it's a replicated instance of the machine that was on the primary. So for complicated licensing, or complicated systems that have multiple VMs, multiple VM servers, vSphere, HA is a great option. However, HA is not cheap. Okay, so VMware does cost money when you start talking about high availability clustering in some of their more advanced applications. For those of you guys on the call today, the version of VMware that I'm running right now, ESXi, is free. It is available to you to download. There are versions of it all the way from 6.5 to 7.0 that you can download and you can try, permanently try, so that you can run VMware in your own instance. For ACM specifically, our replication and auto failover is a little bit more flexible, if I'm being honest, because if I had, and we've seen this come up a couple times recently, I have a customer in the Pacific Northwest that had an enterprise ACM appliance, and it was a physical box that they purchased 2 years ago. They decided that they wanted to run ACM virtually. So what we did is we spun up a virtual instance of ACM. We copied the database from the, or using replication, we copied the database from the old primary hardware-based appliance, server-based appliance, over to the VM, and then we converted their previous appliance to an auto failover. So the reason that I say we're a little bit more flexible with our licensing with auto failover and replication is it can be a combination of physical and virtual appliances. It can be a combination of physical and physical, or virtual and virtual. So yes, you do need two appliances. Yes, you do need duplicate licensing and things like that if you're using auto failover, but it does provide some flexibility. If you're a customer that's already using HA for virtual, for VMware, use HA, right? You just have a second instance of ACM running. Now, you may end up running into, with Jeff's last question here, are licenses tied to the IP of NIC1 or something else in the VM world? Yes, right? So licensing is tied to the appliance. When I go through and I do my appliance here, and I add a license, and I do my activation of that appliance, ACM sends information up to our licensing cloud, and it registers that device based on that licensing. So if for whatever reason this VM died, or maybe I accidentally deleted it and I still had licensing attached to it, you can work with our technical support to move that licensing to a brand new machine, but you cannot just move it to another box because your hardware IDs and your MAC addresses and things like that will change. Licensing is not tied to just a MAC address. It is tied to multiple items within the appliance. So you can't just move things around without having to possibly call technical support and have them change your licensing around. That does tie us into the licensing portal, however, though. You do have the ability as a partner or as a customer, as we talked about on the licensing portal discussion a couple weeks ago. If I knew that I needed to move this VM instance to another VM hypervisor, I could go into my licensing portal, deactivate all of the licenses on this appliance, spin up my new appliance, copy the VM, or move it over to wherever it's got to go, re-enter the licenses here, and then reactivate them on the new one. So you can move things around through the licensing portal. But once again, if you're having trouble with that, or if you run into an issue with that, we do recommend contact technical support, and they can work with you through through those challenges. So Jeff, hopefully that answers. But the second part of your question is, no, you can't boot a snapshot and then just change the IP address. You would have to do some license activate and deactivate. All right. Any other questions coming in, guys? I know we're all probably getting ready for this nice 3-day holiday. So I'll give you 13, maybe 12 minutes of your day back. As always, appreciate everybody joining today. Mr. Francisco Otero, what do we have lined up for Monday?
Well, so holiday Monday, right? So we will not have a session on Monday. Rob will pick up that on Wednesday. Rob, you there?
Yes, I'm here. So Wednesday we'll talk about roles, delegations, routing groups, access groups, and partitioning.
Cool. And next Friday, guys, we're going to be doing something a little bit fun. Originally, we were going to be talking about ACM 6.6. That may still be on the agenda. We're close enough that I should have some additional information on that. But we're going to be talking about Verti biometrics, a little bit of Bosch intrusion, and as well, we're kind of showing off a cool application using facial recognition and how that can integrate with our ACM platform. So hopefully you guys will be back with us next Wednesday and Friday. And please, everyone, go enjoy a nice 3-day weekend. Have fun, be safe, and we will see you all next week.